This is Jennifer Paustenbaugh, and it is Friday, October 31st, 2008. We are here in the Dean's Conference Room in the OSU Library, and I am with Dr. John King, who's a distinguished alumnus of the College of Veterinary Medicine. And I'm also joined today by Dr. Sydney Ewing, an emeritus faculty member in the College of Veterinary Medicine, and Heather Moberly, the veterinary medicine librarian, who are here to assist me with this interview. So Dr. King, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule at this conference to join us today for this interview. And I know that you were a graduate in 1955, and while most of our interview is going to focus on your time as a student here at OAMC and then your subsequent career, could you tell us a little bit about your background, your family background, where you grew up, and any other information you'd like to share about your pre-OAMC days?
I am honored that you are taking this information and that you think I'm worthy of it. Thank you very much. I was raised in Massachusetts, and I don't remember much of my really young life, but when I was 7, I was sent to a boys' school because my folks had split up and I had no place to go. I had 3 older sisters. They went with the 3 aunts that we had, but I had to go someplace. So I went to this school for 10 years. I saw my mother twice a year, and to this day I thought it was wonderful. And I had a good time there. I've had a good time most everywhere in my life. At that boys' school, it was a farm school. You did all the jobs that you do at a farm, all the crops, all the harvesting, everything like this. And it was very worthwhile. Then I had 4 years of the Army, and that 4 years was a blessing because I got in the paratroopers. I made $50 extra a month. That was fine. But the 48 months that I had in the Army, in the service, the 4 years, gave me 48 months of education under the GI Bill. And that's what I used primarily for the vet school. But the pre-vet work I did in Delaware a little bit, and I worked. And my wife was working because I got married in 1947 while I was still in the service. And she kind of put me through the University of Delaware because I didn't want to use the GI Bill until I got into vet school. Your kind Dean McElroy out here at the veterinary school, he was a classmate of the dean of professional students, those who wanted to go on to professional schools. He was a classmate of that dean. And so when I wrote to Oklahoma to get into vet school, because Cornell wouldn't take me because they had just one from Delaware and Pennsylvania a year to go to Cornell. So he wrote to the dean and said, and to me, that if you want to come to Oklahoma, why don't you keep up your good grades, even come to Oklahoma, and then possibly apply from Oklahoma. I did that. I had a wonderful time doing it. I met the best man at my wedding. His family lived here in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and it made a very good place for me to go on weekends, and my wife and I to go on weekends to their little ranch. I incidentally picked up lots of Indian arrowheads on their property. That was nice. When I got out here, Dr. McElroy, I had an interview at the veterinary school, and I made it. I think I made it mostly because I was a paratrooper in the Army, and one of the faculty here was a paratrooper that was in the war. I was in the Army before the atom bomb went off, and but I didn't get into any fighting. I had a good time in the Army too, because I knew they couldn't shoot me. I was too fast. I was too young. So you can't shoot young men. Maybe the guy next to me, but not me. But anyhow, I didn't have any problem with that, getting into vet school. And, well, I had a little problem. Physics was a son of a gun. We had to take physics to get in those days, and I was not that smart. I had a good memory, but I was not that smart as a student. I had to work every day or every grade I got. I had to work for. I didn't get anything easily. When I finished, after 5 years here at Oklahoma A&M College, I think it's nice that it's changed in a way, but either way, I was very proud. Our son was born here at the hospital, the older hospital in Stillwater, and all in all, a wonderful time in the vet school. Of course, there was a little animosity somewhere along the line because every damn Yankee they accepted into the veterinary school kept out in Okie, and that wasn't looked at too nicely. But it happened, and I was just so proud to get in.
So were there any specific incidences along those lines that you recall?
Yeah, I wasn't the best cowboy in the class, but close to it, because I would run the horses around in the paddock that were all the ponies that the university bought for use, and I would get out there with the ponies and ride them bareback. But the only way I could get on is to get them running, and then I could swing up on them hanging their mane. But doing that, and there's 8, 10, 15 ponies, I would swing sometimes too far and fall over on the other side between all these horses' legs. But it's interesting, the horses will not step on you if you're soft, because they think it's a hole and they might break their leg. At least that's what I was told, and it worked out that way. So that was one of my better thoughts. The football games were wonderful. I was disappointed that Oklahoma A&M didn't beat OU, but that was part of life.
When you lived here, did you live in Vet Village?
Oh, yes. Not in your vet. I think they had a vet village, or no, it had to be there because it was Army barracks. But the one we lived in was the south one, at least the one that was between the veterinary school and the main campus, not the one up on Knobloch. Is it Knobloch Avenue?
Yes, there's Knobloch.
Yeah, at the end of Knobloch. I didn't get to live up there. It was in the Army barracks between the vet school and the regular campus.
Okay. So I take it your quarters at that time were pretty Spartan?
They were wonderful.
They were wonderful.
Yeah, they're Army barracks, but they were wonderful. I have no complaint on that kind of stuff. Actually, it was better because the buildings were being demolished slowly, and I think after we left, they didn't last very long, at least the ones down here, not up on that village. And we were able to do what we wanted in those buildings pretty much. I had a dog, and I had a hole in the wall. I could let the dog out, and without going downstairs to let her out, she went out her own thing and came back. So things like that. We had a good time.
So you came to Oklahoma from Massachusetts via Delaware. What was your impression when you first got to Stillwater?
Oh my goodness, we're a long way from civilization when we got out here and driving from wherever we drove, we went to Broken Arrow quite a few weekends because that family had a lot of eggs and vegetables and things like that they gave us. And the GI Bill of $105, I think it might have been $10 more than that when I was married, but we welcomed that kind of aid.
Sure.
And also I welcomed the fellow who was in charge of the large animal clinic. Right now I forgot his name, but he gave me a job in the library in the veterinary school, and didn't pay very much, but every nickel counted in those days. So he did it, I think, to help me. I'm not sure he needed it, but I thought it was wonderful of them to do that.
So what did this job entail?
Beg your pardon?
What did this student job entail?
1 or 2 hours a day I would go down to the library and either put the books away or work with papers or file them. It wasn't very much work. Of course, as a veterinary student, we worked in cleaning the stables and things like that. But I was an eager little beaver, and I think I learned a lot in veterinary medicine, but also in getting along with people. I learned a lot.
So do you recall how many people were in your entering class?
32.
32? And that was about typical for that time, wasn't it?
Yes, but we lost a lot of the students. I think we lost 8 from our class. Maybe there was 40 it started, but we lost 8. Now that was an awful lot. But it made us prouder that we stayed in. The fewer that stayed. And
These were academic casualties.
I'm sorry.
These 8 who were lost were academic casualties.
Yes, some of it was intimidation in the sense that when you get in vet school, oh boy, I finally made it in the vet school. But you can't be proud or you can't be too happy with that because you haven't passed any exams. When you pass this exam, the first exam, well, you can't be too cocky because you have to get through another course. And then you still can't feel free that I've made it. And I think it's 4 years of that many of us worried about. And we actually thought about it. But some of the young people who were there, it scared them that they knew they're going to have to work. And it was very hard. And a couple of them, I actually know, they said we can't keep doing this anymore. It's just too much. And they left the school. And they hadn't even taken exams maybe 1 or 2. But it was just too much studying. But most of us liked it. So it was just a few people.
You mentioned that to get into the vet school, you had to take physics and how difficult that was for you. Your first year, what was your most difficult class?
It was well organized. We knew what we had to do. And I don't remember anything really that bugged me. When I went on for an advanced degree, you had to pass German, and it took me 4 years to study that just a little bit each year until I finally passed. That was even worse. It was worse than anything worse than Oklahoma.
Now, I understand that June Iben was the first female veterinary medicine student here and that she was a member of your class. Do you recall her?
I recall her very well, especially one day when this is a little bit risque, but you have to do rectals on cows to see if they're pregnant, and otherwise, a cow without a calf, a dairy cow, you lose a couple months' money in milk production. So we would be doing a rectal on a cow or something, and one of the wise guys, maybe me, I don't know, would say, hey, Ivan, I got you by the ovaries, when we're in there seeing if they're pregnant. And she finally got tired of that, and she lowered the boom on the whole class. And most of us kind of smiled, but we respected her for that. That was great. We've been friends ever since, because she's in Western Pennsylvania, and I'm not too far above the border in New York. And we've helped her out a couple times when she needed help. She had a fabulous practice until she had a wreck on her motorcycle. But she's still practicing and working with big cats. That's what she most has worked with, big cats, lions, tigers, bobcats, you name it.
Interesting. Were there some professors that you especially remember?
Say it again.
Were there some professors that you especially remember having very positive interactions with, or who really influenced your career?
Peterson was, even on the way out here, this trip, as I drove across the fields, I remember the whole class going out on some days with Peterson, looking, identifying poisonous plants. He was wonderful like that. Friend helped him, but Friend was always low key. He helped Peterson, but he was low key. Guys like, I had a big run in with Tennille, because I was Dr. Tennille, because I was always doing something a little bit different than most of my classmates. I don't know why. And when I did that one time, I took some radiopaque material and I injected into the aorta of a dog who had lost his leg. And I wanted to see where the vessel, the main vessel that I might have to work on when I took the leg off surgically. I guess it was hurt somehow. And I wanted to see where the vessel stopped. So I knew that if I could give it this radiopaque material, take a radiograph every second or two, I could see that. It worked fine. I was able to see it. It all worked fine. But Dr. Tennille was out of town at the time. So I asked one of his assistants if I could do all that. Yes, but Dr. Tennille gave me holy heck. And then at the end of the semester, he gave me the lowest grade he could give anybody without flunking them. Because if you flunked in those days, one class, you're out. And so he didn't flunk me, but I went into him to ask him. I says, well, why did you do that? And he says, because of your attitude, and you needed a little bit of comeuppance, something like that. I hated that at the moment, but ever since, I wished I had listened to him a little bit more and paid attention. And even on the way out here, of all the people, he made almost the biggest impression on me for my life. Not for the education. Well, for the education. He was smart. He was capable. He was a great, big, heavy man, but the best hands you can imagine. And if my bone was broken, I'd like him to fix it. But he turned out, even on this trip, right, 2008, I thought how wonderful he was to try and help me. I wish I had kept my mouth shut.
The folly of youth, huh?
Yeah.
Early on in the college's history, there weren't really a lot of opportunities for research, and yet there were some faculty who had an appreciation for research. Can you talk about any of those people?
I had no interest. I've had no interest except on the practical application doing a necropsy. That's an autopsy on an animal. I would rather do that than worry about little nitty-gritty things in research. Dr. Pansier now, he said he worked for 50 years doing what I've done all my life, and I still like it, but he's now into research himself with hepatozoan, a parasite in dogs, and he's absolutely on cloud nine doing that research, finding out that it's the coyote fleas that are involved or it's the egrets not involved. I'm impressed with his interest. I didn't have that interest. I never had it. I like to do another autopsy and see why, or go to the farm. And that was the best opportunity, is to go to the farm at the end of the week or something, whenever I had opportunity, and to find out why that farmer had those diseases or that we autopsied during the week. I did the same in Australia. I did the same in South Africa. They gave me the car. They gave me the ability, the permission. They gave me the gas. It was wonderful to do these things. But that's an applied basis. I didn't want to do research, and I didn't know anybody who really did anything in those days. They probably were, but that's my ignorance, not their fault.
So
you did know about Dr. Krull working at Cornell in the summertime.
Well, he was probably the most renowned individual I knew at the veterinary school, but I didn't know what he did. He came back one year after he had discovered the dicocilium, the liver fluke, and he talked about it. But I already said that Peterson was one of the best practical teachers, but I think Krull would be the best scientific teacher that I had. He was fantastic. He was nice about it. He was the one who gave us most pop quizzes. At the top of the paper, it might say pop. It's a pop quiz because I misspelled scissors on one of those darn things. And he was wonderful. And when I knew him a little, I knew where he worked at Cornell in the creek behind my house. When working on that, I knew I went to the farm. Subsequent to that, where he did his original research with these liver flukes. Very good. Probably I wouldn't know of a better researcher in veterinary medicine than Krull, and I'm glad I knew him when he was here.
So given the fact that you said you weren't really all that interested in research, what was it that led you to Cornell to pursue a PhD?
In order to get a PhD, you have to have, at Cornell, you don't have to have residence credits or for classes you take. You have to have a finished thesis signed by your major and minor professors. And when I got to Cornell, there was a whole bunch of dogs that were dying with hepatitis X. Nobody knew what it was, but it turned out to be aflatoxin in peanut meal, spoiled peanut meal. And I had 6 bags of raw ingredients that I could use with dogs. And it was a nice research project. I learned more in that research project, and I learned one heck of a lot. But it wasn't something I was going to do the rest of my life, just work on research projects. I would go to farms where they lost an animal or foal that's got a broken leg. Well, they said the mare kicked the foal. Well, sure, mares might kick the foal, but most of the cases over 50 years, I found that the animals had soft bones. That's why they broke. The mare might have kicked it. And then I do the autopsy. I find the rachitic rosary. That's the enlarged ribs junction with. And I would say, well, I made the diagnosis. Well, this is rickets, but it's not due to vitamin D deficiency. It's the vitamin A that's really at fault, because vitamin A is anti-vitamin D. I don't know if the rest of the world knows that now, but it honestly, to my mind, and I did it on each case as it came into the postmortem room. That's a kind of research, applied research. I didn't try to reproduce it by giving them this diet. I did a little bit in pigs. Oh, incidentally, I forgot. I worked with rats for 6 years at Carnegie Mellon University, and I did have time to do some of these research projects. And I enjoyed that too. But I've enjoyed everything I've done. I would rather do autopsies and not basic research.
And I understand that you have a website that is utilized very heavily by veterinary medicine
Thank you
students.
for your librarian here. And
Yeah, she's great.
over the years, I probably would spend 2 hours a day taking, sometimes longer, but average, no, at least an hour a day taking Kodachromes of every specimen that I autopsied. I would do it in the whole carcass, or I'd do it when it's partially opened, or the individual lesion. And the slides were all marked in a very specific fashion, so I can find almost any slide or Kodachrome 2x2 in 10, 15 seconds from the whole collection. And there's 50,000 of them in the collection. Now, they're not 50,000 diseases that I've worked on, but one time I would do this heart lesion, and gee, it's a great lesion. I'd take a picture of it, but it's only on the inside of the heart. And then the next time, the next case, well, most of it would be on the outside of the heart. I could see the muscle lesion. And so I'd take a picture of that. Many of the students wanted pictures for their senior seminars that they had, every one of them had to give. And so I took a lot of pictures. When I went to the farms for any problem, pigs, horses, or cows, I'd usually take a picture to show all these calves. They're not gaining any weight. We don't know why. What's the problem? You go there, and in New York, it's cold, and the walls are wet, and they're lying on wet bedding. And if you want to get cold, just get wet and let it evaporate, and you'll get cold. And these calves didn't get enough to eat, and they'd all be starving. But the farmer didn't want to believe it. The clinicians didn't know about it, really. And that was my job, as a little applied research to this necropsy case. So I would do those things.
You almost sound like a veterinary CSI type of person.
Well, I did enough of them that it was very interesting.
That sounds
And
like
it helped the veterinarian, it helped the owner, and I would take pictures of all these. So here they are.
So, and what is the website called?
Well, it's necropsy. It's got a big long thing, http:// well, I forget it. I don't use it very often.
Oh, okay. Well, I heard it was called Dr. King's Necropsy Show and Tell. So,
Well, at Cornell, when I got there, at the end of every week, we would have show and tell. Sometimes we'd have it twice a week. We had so many specimens. And I would just stand there and discuss what I found. The good thing about that, from Cornell, I would carry once a year for a week, I would take 4, 5, or 6 graduate students, foreigners or vet students, usually graduate students in pathology. And we go down to all the veterinary schools on the East Coast. And not all vet schools. Animal Medical Center in New York, where Dr. Kroll was for a while, then Pennsylvania, then Virginia, then North Carolina, and Georgia, Tifton, Georgia Veterinary School, and Tifton, and Gainesville, Florida. It would take a week to do that, and I would take 1,000, well, I don't know, hundreds of specimens in clot solution that kept the color, kept them soft, and I would show them at each one of these places for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, then drive like heck to the next place. And it worked out very good. All these lesions I would discuss, but every now and then they would save specimens for me, trying to test me, because I would bring out my specimens and I'd have a couple hundred of them, and they would bring out 25 or 30 to show me, to quiz me, and that worked. It was very nice for both of us. Actually, I'm going to do that at Baton Rouge in December this year, the same thing. And they say, well, we're saving a lot of specimens for you, and, they're going to see if I know them, because I don't use histories usually. If I get a carcass, I open it up, make the diagnosis if possible, and everything I find should fit the history, because that's where it came from. But I don't want to know the history first, because I'm prejudiced. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you might take a shortcut knowing what they found. I don't want to know that. And I've done that all my life. I've enjoyed it. Roger Panchera does that a little bit here also. I don't know how much he does, but I'm sure he does it too. Anyhow, we started at Cornell with a wheelbarrow. I'd go to Fox's and Roberts' class and Kirk's class with a wheelbarrow of stuff. And then after a while, I got to a stainless steel push cart. And then after a while, we got to this necropsy show and tell on Friday afternoons at 4:30 every day. Sometimes every day, but almost always on a Friday, save all the stuff.
So it seems like doing an autopsy or a necropsy there's a lot of art involved in that. How did you learn that art?
Well, Dr. Peter Olofsson was a grand old man in pathology, and he used to do it, something like that. And then Roger did it because he got his PhD there, Panchera. And then when I got there a couple years later, I learned from Roger and Olofsson. And then I developed my own way in some of the techniques. Because you don't have time to waste a lot of time in trying to open something. So you open a gallbladder. It doesn't take me long to do the gallbladder, but I open it onto the white surface, and if there's any flukes floating in the bile, I'm going to see the flukes in that bile with a white background. And so you do that just automatically in every autopsy. You break in every animal, you break the rib against the curvature. That's easy. When it's once broken, you can cut the costochondral junction to hunt for a very specific lesion that's not well described anywhere, because people don't do it. So I try to teach a single technique. It takes me 4 hours to do no, I can do a horse in an hour. That means taking out the brain also, if there's nothing wrong with it, or a cow. And a dog, about 20 minutes. I can finish that dog, and I'll tell you, if there's a lesion, I'll bet you I won't miss a lesion very often. Or I shouldn't, but I do the whole thing. And at the end of it, you can ask me, well, what you think of the adrenals? And hardly anybody looks at adrenals. That even came up here in the last couple of days. Pigs have a nice disease called PSS. And the cause of that disease, everybody says get muscle lesions. Well, some do. They all don't. But what they all have, almost 99% of them, have small adrenals. But if you don't look at adrenals in every animal, you won't know that. So I push that kind of stuff. And I've got a lot of pictures for it. And yeah, that's part of show and tell. And okay.
So was that Dr. Olafson's approach, that you didn't read the case first, that you went ahead and did the necropsy?
No, I don't think so. Because a lot of people fault me for this. They fault me in the sense that, well, why didn't you read the history? But I should tell you, I never throw the carcass out unless I've read the history, even afterwards. But I would have seen, if there was a brain tumor, I would have seen a prolapse of the hindbrain. If there was whatever, I would have seen that. And then in it will fit the history that I get with the animal. If it doesn't, I have a cocky attitude. If it doesn't, then they're wrong, not me. And that has caused some problems personally or whatever. I'm not that easy guy to get along with, because it's like I don't ask students their names very often, because I expect the student to know their name. Whereas I will ask them, I said, well, how did this tumor get from here to there, through what vessels, circulation-wise, and all that. So I'll ask them things they have to think.
So after you got your PhD at Cornell, what did you do from there?
I went to Washington State to teach a couple of years. I had a little bit of a hard time there because the expression is, you can always tell a Cornellian, but you cannot tell him much. And I think they all were, they kind of, I heard it several times out there, because I was a typical Cornellian. And then I went to work for industry doing rats and mice and monkeys and stuff like that. But that all got to be very routine, because you keep the rat for 2 years and you do the autopsy, and it doesn't take long to do them with a sharp knife. I should say something nice about knives. If you don't have a sharp knife, don't do the autopsy. It's work. You can't push the knife, the dull knife, through the meat. You can't open up the ureter on every horse and every cow, every dog with one knife. I don't use scissors. I can open up a cat's kidney. I can open up the cat's ureter with my knife because it's sharp. So there's different ways of doing these things. Some people would just be appalled that I didn't read that history first, but I'm not going to miss nothing. And that's important to me.
You mentioned that you had been in Australia and in South Africa. Tell me a little bit about that. What led you there?
I did the same thing in those locations. I went to South Africa. I had if you have to study something for the whole country, you're going to be a pathologist. Well, in America, if you want to study pigs, you don't go to Cornell. If you want to study beef cattle, you don't really go to Cornell. You're not going to see any as a pathologist. So in order to see these animals, in the United States, you kind of have to go where the pigs are, where the cows are. But in Australia and South Africa, everything comes into a central lab. Certainly in South Africa. But I just came back from Peru, did the, a few weeks ago, and the same thing, they bring the animals in, and it's I don't really want to know the history. When it gets to be a nervous case, I have to know the history, but I've already got the brain, I've already looked at it, and if it's not obvious. Now, saving some specimens, if there's any hint that you want urine, well, you'd take it as you do the autopsy. It only takes, 10 seconds. So when I'm down in South Africa, the animals would come in and I do a complete autopsy. And in Australia, a complete autopsy, an aborted calf, you do all of it because you will find everything that's wrong, darn near everything. But I've been everywhere doing this. I had a year in Argentina do it, a year in Brazil. I was in Korea in April this year for the month, and so that's what I do. I do autopsies without a history, and most of the time, by doing these autopsy necropsies, even in while I was in Korea, I find things they've never recognized before. Only because I'm looking at them, at the little things. You do a complete autopsy and you'll find them all.
So are you working with students, teaching them your techniques, or are you working with professionals, or both when you do this travel?
Surprisingly, when I go to these places, if I'm there for a year, I'm usually on the faculty or the staff at the veterinary school, and I serve my time like they serve their time. But then I show my Kodachromes to the students and to the residents, and all the different nice Kodachromes. And then there's students there. But I don't interfere with their method of doing things because it upsets some people. It shouldn't, but it does. I mean, they would upset me because just they do it a little bit different. But they do a good job. See, what was more to that question? There was something
Well,
else.
I was just interested in if you were going there in the role of a faculty member or working with, professionals in industry or...
I usually worked with the pathologist and the resident students. I didn't work with the undergraduate students unless I was going to be part of their faculty for a year. And then I'd have to show each student that. But I would show the techniques to all of the residents. And some of them did exceptionally well with it. And many of them came to the United States. Actually, that's one reason I got to go to these places, because many of the students had come to Cornell, and then they go home and they invite me there. So I go. I usually don't get paid because Cornell pays you half salary for a whole year, or full salary for 6 months if you go. I usually try to go for a year because it's easier for my wife and my son and all. I do the autopsies with the residents and graduate students. And I have show and tells at most places for them also. And they all like that because I had enough experience to ad lib that this is something a little bit different, how often you see it. And it's just a different way of doing things.
Sure.
But I did it as unknown. And it's when I went down, the last time somebody in Georgia, I was at Georgia and I did the autopsy. And it should have had a certain lesion in the reticulum. It should have had a piece of wire going through the reticulum to kill the cow with what's called hardware disease. And I did the autopsy. I couldn't find anything. I found a hole, but what did it? And they had already found it. It's usually a piece of wire about 4 or 5 inches long with a curve in the middle of it. And that's what allows it to go through the wall easy. But they had already taken it out, and they wanted me to find out that, I couldn't find it. So, hey, King, you goofed up. Well, I didn't, but it was a fun thing, and I accept that. I want them, because if I put you on the spot to ask you questions, everybody else around that table, the only reason I'm asking you is because all the others don't know the answer either. And then I pick on you, and the other people find it, well, we're worried about King, but as soon as they learn this is the technique that I'm using, it works.
Well, it sounds like if you've traveled very extensively, and in doing so, do you see unusual things that you haven't seen here in the States?
Well, right now I have a publication being printed. It's true stories of a different kind. And it's 104 stories there, and I got 100 and something more to finish up. And I'll bet you 90% of the pathologists in the United States haven't seen those lesions or understand the pathogenesis, the mechanism for its development, because they're different. If you open up a cow and you see its abdomen has got peritonitis, fibrin, and some ingesta that's leaked out, then you know it's got a ruptured intestine. But why do cows get ruptured intestines, especially 5 hours after calving? Well, then you do the autopsy and you find out that you don't have to ask the farmer, you don't have to have the history, or I don't have to. I'd look at it and say, hey, you put a couple chains on that calf to help the cow deliver, and in doing that, you had a loop of intestine in the pelvis, and the calf coming out, it compressed the intestine, and the loop that's in the pelvic canal ruptured. Hardly anybody, to my knowledge, has ever seen that and put the two of them together, that it was due to owner-assisted parturition problems. It happens. Nobody sees that. I don't know why not. And yesterday, Roger says, that was the best things you could have said when I gave a talk here. He says, that's the best things to teach these guys. They got to look at everything when you do an autopsy or necropsy.
So the title of the book is?
Pardon?
The title of the book that you just mentioned. Can you tell me that again?
Well, actually, it's King's necropsy book.
Okay.
I could have said Olafson's necropsy book, but he didn't teach it all this way. He had his own way of doing things. Every animal I do has to lie on its left side, right side up. And then as soon as I get to something, and if you do it another way, then you don't recognize what's instantly not right. Whereas I do everyone the same way, and Now, there are other ways of doing it than my way. And that's in my necropsy book. I've written all of this down in a necropsy book. And then I've got the smells of pathology. You can make different diagnoses just by the smell. If you open the abdomen up of a horse and he's got little kidney disease, but you smell a strong urine odor, and then you look at the colon, it's purple, and you say, well, he's got uremic colitis. Not many people have ever seen or really heard of that. And it's one of my true stories, because I got dozens of these cases. I'm not talking about one. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Other questions you want to ask?
Would you like to say anything about the conversion of your Kodachromes to an electronic medium?
Very good. Over the years, the last 5 or 10 years, I had a gal who I paid part-time, and the school paid a little bit. And she took all my Kodachromes and she digitalized them, and she did a good job. I had 2 secretaries I paid on the side. One was free, but another secretary in Wisconsin, she was a veterinarian, actually a nurse and a veterinarian. She did lots of, I wrote out the 23,000 Kodachromes that I put down. I went through the whole file and I chose 23,000. And they're all good cases. And I wrote a history for each one of them. The animal, the tissue, the description, the brief description, white spots, connective tissue, whatever. And then I gave an etiological diagnosis, the cause if I knew it. I gave a morphological diagnosis just that fits the description, and name the cause if it's a parasite-specific parasite, Dicocilium dendriticum. And then I gave what I like on the whole thing is my it says comment, note, and what it amounts to, it's what I think about that case, no matter what you think. This is what I'm thinking, and then I can pull up any one of those, by any of those titles. I can push cow, liver, parasites in the bile ducts, because somebody looked there and found them, little red ones or something like this, Dicocilium, or lungworms. They would know, and I can pull that up within 20 seconds or so out of my Kodachromes. Now, when I retired, what am I going to do with all my Kodachromes? I got 27,000 that aren't on the web page. What am I going to do with them at Cornell? Cornell didn't want them. They already had a copy of every one of them that I took, or almost every one, and nobody was going to work on it. But so I said, well, if they don't want to, I will. But now you also said, when my wife and I got married, we've been married 63 years or something, and we just moved to a smaller house. Now, what do you do with a married collection of stuff of 62 years when you go from 9 rooms down to 3? That's been the hardest work we've done in 10 years. Because which picture do we want? Whatever do we want? But how do you get rid of all 50,000 Kodachromes? So I called up many people everywhere. I says, do you have any interest in any of these? And I got about 20. Yeah, they'll take them. But they didn't want all of them. And they wanted a history for every one of them and whatever. But they were very nice. And I got rid of, of course I have extras. I've got Dr. Bob Garman's rat tumors. I mean, and that's 8 carousels of 80. That's what, 640 Kodachromes of just rat tumors. So I got to give these to somebody. And I finally worked it out when I went down to the AFIP, the Armed Forces Institute Pathology, and those people have access to the Library of Congress, I don't know, but the National Library of Pathology. And they took it. They said they'd gladly have it. They're going to digitalize the other 27,000, and I didn't have to throw them out, because a lot of people have thrown out their collections because it's not easy to make a good collection. And that's why ignore them, throw them out. I couldn't do that to mine. At least I hoped I didn't have to, and thank goodness they helped.
Excellent.
You recently gave Oklahoma State University your parasitology notes and included your own personal notes as well as those that Dr. Krull handed out, and even included some of the old examinations. And this, I was interested to see, was bound, professionally bound. Would you have anything to say about how you came to do that and how you chose to pass it on to Oklahoma State?
I have been proud since I left Oklahoma State that maybe accepting some well-trained veterinary parasitologists, I am as good with parasitology in the autopsy room as anybody, maybe not Roger Panchera and maybe some other people, but I don't take second seat for anybody in parasitology in the necropsy room doing autopsies. And most of that I learned from Krull, and he gave us these handout notes, and it's like getting a book. he gave us these handout notes and my own comments to help, and I put it all together. But it was the most valuable single collection of any information I've ever had from anybody. You know, not a published book like Jubb and Kennedy or things like that. But Krull's was all practical, more in my line of thinking. It wasn't all the stuff that came from the literature where somebody who's not a pathologist, for instance, did the autopsy and he thought this bloody gut was a lesion. He didn't recognize it because he's not a pathologist. He didn't recognize that it wasn't a lesion. So that's written down for the disease he was talking about, or he thought he was talking about. He made that a lesion. That's baloney. Krull didn't do that. It was all his own work and his notes that we added to the side, my notes, the tests that Wally Carter took from Krull, a couple that I took. I didn't get good grades on, and but I didn't sit back for anybody on that. Let's see, and that's where those notes came from. And it's like when you read Olafson's textbook of pathology. He didn't write it, but he had a textbook of pathology he used for teaching. And he wrote his little notes on the side. That book is more valuable to me than, almost anything else. Rickard's notes that he put on the side of the books that I got from him, they're wonderful. And their comments on the side. I didn't know you were going to treat my book as well as you are, or my collection. I think it's wonderful that you did. And I think it's worthwhile. It's still got the most veterinary parasitology information than any book I know. Much of the stuff that's written today is by PhDs. They're okay. It's fine, but if they're just a PhD and not a veterinarian, they can't speak the veterinary language. They can't serve as a role model for a veterinarian. So I don't put the guys down because I don't do their research. I don't even know what they're talking about anymore. But in the post-mortem room, they wouldn't dare walk in and say, well, I don't believe you, John. I'd tell them, yeah, okay, yeah,
Well, I understand that you are being honored this evening as a distinguished graduate of the College of Veterinary Medicine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm humbled by it, and there's nothing I can say except that there are more people, I think, who deserve it than I do. Because I've done what I wanted for 50 years and the way I wanted, and they allowed me to do that. So I'm just so pleased at that. And should I be proud of it, being such a whatever? I don't know.
Well, it is a very nice honor.
It absolutely is. And I'm not sure I deserve it, but thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.
I know that many veterinarians who already had PhDs who wanted to become members of the American College of Veterinary Pathologists came to you when they were preparing to take the examination for the ACVP. Can you talk about your role in helping young pathologists get ready for that hurdle?
Only through Cornell and the graduate students who came there. Now, there's an organization called C.L. Davis Foundation, and Sam Thompson started that because C.L. Davis was a government pathologist who, in meat inspection, one of the best, and he did a fabulous job. And, well, there's a lot of old-time veterinarians like Olafson or Rickett or McEntee who are fantastic people, smart and capable and everything. But Sam Thompson, he was in the Army for a number of years. He and Charlie C.L. Davis were good friends, And I had started the Olafson short course at Cornell. And that meant that every year we had a week's meeting of Kodachrome presentation. And I started that, and Olafson was still alive, actually. But then Sam Thompson said, John, why don't you come down to New Jersey and give the Kodachrome presentation? And I went down there and gave 4 hours of Kodachromes on a Saturday morning. And then I'd take half a dozen Cornell residents or whatever in pathology down with me, and we'd come back that evening. And I did that every month for the first year or two. But then Sam Thompson started getting new people other than John King, because I was just running out of good Kodachromes. And, oh heck. Excuse me 1 second. So he started getting other people. And from that, I did mine for 30 years until I was getting ready to retire at Cornell. But he had done the same thing with Kodachromes. And he started doing it a little more often. He started doing it at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, whereas I just went down from different schools. And he had big classes. My Olafson short course, the people would come from all over the world and for a week, and they got, 40 some hours of Kodachromes. But then I had to stop because my information was only on necropsies. But then we had Delahunter for the brain. He's probably the world's best veterinary neuropathologist. And then we had Danny Scott on the skin, and they started giving their specialties. So I got out of it a little. I didn't get out of it. I still give general stuff in the postmortem room. But they started doing their specialties. And if anybody asked me what they should do, should they be a generalist like John King or Roger Panchera, I'd probably say no. And the reason is I don't know, and probably Roger doesn't know, all the basics that we should know about any one disease. Sure, you know the virus, the rabies virus, but you don't know how to culture it. You don't know what's new and different. And I think everybody almost, I think I'm going to get arrested for heresy or shot. But I think being a specialist, you can give more. But you need a generalist like King. You need a generalist like Panchera. So there's room for all of us, but I would think I might go into specialty. Eyeballs. How many veterinarians know anything about eyeballs? Well, a lot of them go to ophthalmology, but when you've got 6 species to look at their eyeballs, it's like the human, the MD guys. They only work 24 hours a day, and the veterinary pathologist, if he does it all, he only works 24 hours a day. I hope I got the numbers right. And therefore, I think you can learn more. If I have a brain lesion that I don't understand, I go to Delahunter. If I have a skin lesion, I go to Miller or Scott. If I have eyeballs, I go to Reese. Because I am a general pathologist. I'm pretty good, but I work at it. But I have to go to those experts. Parasitologists. Now there's a problem. Many parasitologists don't have a clue about the average veterinary problems with parasites. One best example I had there was one of the young pathologists, parasitologists, came into the postmortem room and said, could I borrow some knives and instruments to do some autopsies in the field? I said, sure. Why some? Well, I'm going to take some students with me to do the autopsies on these sheep to show them the parasites that's killing them. And the problem was he did take them. He took the company car or the van. He took out everything, and they killed 5 of the guy's sheep. And that was okay. but didn't make a diagnosis. And when they didn't make a diagnosis, that was embarrassing to him, enough so that he came back and he said, "John, you're right. I should have been a veterinarian." It's like I had another clinician in a seminar. They did a lot of work on a woodchuck. I used to do a lot of woodchucks, and they still do them at Cornell. They got a $5 million grant to work on the woodchucks and stuff like that, associated with hepatitis in humans and stuff like that. And I just did the autopsies, and the histo, an autopsy means gross and histopathology. You just don't do the carcass and quit. Then the senior student who was given a seminar, he finished his seminar and he didn't, I says, "Well, was the dog autopsied?" Many times or not, but he spoke up and said, "Yes, it was autopsied." But it didn't sound right, the autopsy results, to me. So I asked in the seminar, all the veterinary students there, a few faculty and whatever, and I says, "Was this animal autopsied?" "Yes." And I says, "Well, was it done by the pathology department?" And by a pathologist? He didn't know how to answer that. But all of a sudden, some guy in the back who's in charge says, he says, "Yes, it was autopsied, and I did the autopsy." Whoops. That's good. I didn't say that. Now I'm thinking, uh-oh. But anyhow, I spoke up. I said, "I beg your pardon? You cannot do an autopsy." He said, "What do you mean I can't?" I says, "An autopsy can only be performed by a trained observer of pathological detail. And you don't have that training. Otherwise, you're like a slaughterhouse guy who does 400 cows a day. He's not a pathologist either. But will you call me a surgeon because I've done 6 spays on a dog?" And it was quiet.
I was wondering, with your website, why did you decide to put the quizzes, the ability to do a quiz in it? Is it to be a virtual show and tell or as a review tool? Because we use that feature a lot.
People do that. So we wanted to make it as well-rounded a web page. It wasn't I didn't know how to do any of this. I didn't know how to put it on there. So a guy named, I forgot his name. The guru in the computer, he did all of that. And there's a big web page from Georgia. They have a quiz section in there. And I don't use that. I haven't used that very much. But I think they copied the technique. They didn't copy it, they just used it. And if you find it valuable, that's wonderful. But I really didn't have much to do with that part of it.
But did you ask them to put it there? It was your choice to?
I heard you, but
when you were designing the page, did you ask the programmers to do the quiz part? Or did they ask you if they could do the quiz part?
I think I'm surprised it's on there because I don't think I said, "Hey, let's do that too." I just didn't think that far along. I don't think I had anything to do with it, really. Mm-hmm.
And before we began the taping, you were telling me about how you organized your Kodachromes.
Oh.
Would you tell us that for the camera? Because I thought it sounded like one of the best visual classifications I've ever heard of.
The first thing you must understand when you're making a collection of Kodachromes, that the Kodachromes have to be marked in a certain standard way. So my Kodachromes, they have the postmortem number or the accession number from outside, nothing to do with the web page, but some identification number, autopsy number or necropsy number. And over in the top right, it's the species cow, dog, horse, and if you want to make it a little bit better, you'd make it bovine or canine or cat. But I wasn't that fussy at the moment, so I accepted. When I say it's a cow, well, it's a cow. Doesn't mean it's a milking cow, it just means it's a cow, bovine. Underneath that, it has a tissue, liver, kidney, lung, adrenal, whatever. And that's on the top right, and on the bottom you have the diagnosis. And if you have room for anything else, you could put something else. But those things are on every slide, and every time you look at Kodachromes, you pick it up, or you turn it right side up, and you face it down. That's where you put the number, top left. If you don't, you get a lot of exercise, moving the pages around, hunting for which is the right end up. Don't do that. It's too much time and effort. Then from there, my collection on the wall, about 3/4 of this wall, of notebooks, standard 3-ring binders. And I would have liver, 8 books of liver, one of them on a horse, maybe 2 of them on a cow, 1 of them on a dog, 1 on a cat, 1 pig, sheep, goat. And now I can go to the wall and pick out adrenals. And I just pull out the book on adrenals, and that'll be probably 1 book. And I pick that out, and it's got all the species in there because I didn't have more than that number of pictures to put in the file. And as I pull it out, now I got a notebook, it's in front of me. I look at the top of the page holding 20 Kodachromes. If that's orange, I know it's a cat. I know it's a horse. If it's yellow, I know it's a cat. If it's white, I know it's a sheep, because sheep are so anemic. So white tissues, just for that reason. So that's color-coded. Now I'm down, aren't I? I'm down from the kidney, I'm down to the species, I'm down. Then I got the color. When I go inside adrenals, I can just flip the page, and up at the top of the page of Kodachromes, I have nutrition, viral disease, bacterial diseases, trauma, whatever the classification of the lesions are. And then I can pull out all the trauma cases that affected the adrenal glands. There aren't that many, but I can do that in just, 20 seconds, 30 seconds? It's a good way of doing it.
It's a system that sounds like a librarian would have been proud of to have devised.
Well, there's a woman at Cornell who has done a lot for me, Susan Whitaker. She's a librarian par excellence, and she helps everybody. She helped me a lot because I needed a lot of help, but she's fantastic to have these kind of people. But it's good to have good technicians, because every case you've heard me talk about, if it needed histopathology, I had to give it to the technician. And then I got the slide, and every glass slide has been saved at Cornell. Now they're throwing some of the stuff out, but that's their business, not mine. I had my 50 years to do what I could.
Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you wish we had?
How did my wife help me?
Okay.
How did my wife help me and all the other pathologists I know? We couldn't have done it without their forbearance in all the time we spent in the necropsy room. Cornell was lucky. We were able to do autopsies 24/7, and we did them 24/7. Some schools aren't that lucky. We were lucky because I didn't mind coming in any time. My wife allowed that. Some schools, if you don't have the pathologists who are around who aren't that interested because they have research projects they're busting their hump trying to do, I didn't have research projects. All I had to do was another autopsy. That was wonderful for me. But my wife allowed it. She didn't appreciate the smell when I came home, even though I had taken a shower and changed clothes. I might not have showered. Then I'd have this odor, this aura around me. And it just drove her up a wall. But my coveralls and all that, I could just leave at school. And that was nice. So I do appreciate that. And my son, they had to put up with it. I'd take him to a football game maybe, but if I had 3 horses to do in that afternoon, I'd take him to the football game with a buddy, and then I'd go back and do the horses. Not that I was dedicated, because there are other pathologists around, but some of them were researchers, and they didn't have their heart into it, even though they might have done the work. Their heart wasn't into it. And if they didn't save the specimens, I wouldn't have any for show and tell. And therefore, if I did the autopsy, I had the specimens for show and tell every week. But there's a lot of people I owe everything to, but I have to mention my wife, Marie. She has made it all possible.
We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. That was very generous of you. And
thank you very much, ma'am. I hope I didn't talk too much.
oh no.
Everybody says I do.
We can't get an oral history if they won't speak up. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, congratulations on your award tonight.
Excuse me for making you late.